They used to be feared. The Iron Compass, a name that once made people lock their doors when the engines roared through town. But this ride wasn't about rebellion. It wasn't about territory or power. This ride was about a promise, a dying man's final wish, and the brothers who rode one last time to remember who they really were. To understand where this story ends, you need to know where it began. 20 years ago, in a town most maps forgot to include. Millbrook wasn't dead yet, but you could hear it dying. The steel mill had closed 3 years earlier. Main Street had more boarded windows than open shops. Young people left as soon as they could. The ones who stayed were too old, too poor, or too stubborn to go anywhere else. That's where Jack Lawson found himself in the summer of 2005. 32 years old, 2 tours in Afghanistan behind him, a Purple Heart he kept in a drawer because he didn't know what else to do with it. He'd come home to bury his father and stayed because he had nowhere better to be. Jack worked at Miller's Auto Repair, the only garage still operating in town. He was good with engines, better with engines than people if he was honest. Engines made sense. You could see what was broken. You could fix it. People were different. People carried invisible damage that no wrench could reach. One Saturday morning, a man named Tommy Reyes limped into the garage. Tommy had served 2 different war. Gulf Storm. He walked with a cane now, his right leg mostly metal below the knee. He rolled a beat-up Harley through the door, the sound of rusted metal scraping against concrete echoing through the empty space. "Can you save her?" Tommy asked. Jack looked at the bike. It was a mess, rusted tank, seized engine, cracked frame. The kind of project most mechanics would wave away without a second thought. "I can try," Jack said, "but it'll take time and parts cost money." Tommy nodded slowly. "I've got time, money's harder." Jack should have said no, should have told him to sell it for scrap. Instead, he heard himself say, "Help me work on it. Labor's free if you've got the hands." Tommy extended his hand. His grip was firm. Deal. That's how it started. 2 vets in a garage rebuilding a motorcycle that probably wasn't worth saving. But it wasn't really about the bike. It never is. It was about having something to do, somewhere to be, someone who understood without needing explanations. Over the next 3 months, others joined them. Marcus Chains Williams, who'd driven supply trucks in Iraq and now worked night security at the old mill's abandoned gates. Sarah Red Kellerman, one of the only female mechanics in 3 counties, who'd learned her trade from her father before the VA hospital claimed him. And Devin Wrench Foster, barely 23, who'd washed out of basic training but loved bikes more than anything. They'd meet on weekends, drink cheap beer, work on Tommy's Harley, share stories they couldn't tell anywhere else, the kind of stories that made civilians uncomfortable, the kind of memories that only made sense to people who'd been there. Jack noticed something. When they were together working with their hands covered in grease and surrounded by the smell of motor oil, the nightmares seemed quieter. The anger had somewhere to go. The emptiness felt less empty. They weren't broken vets or forgotten workers. They were builders, fixers, brothers. "We should make this official," Tommy said one night after they'd finally gotten his bike's engine to turn over. The sound was beautiful, like resurrection, like proof that broken things could run again. "Make what official?" Jack asked. Us, we're already a crew, might as well admit it." Jack looked around at the faces. Chains was smiling. Red was nodding. Wrench looked like someone had just told him Christmas was coming early. "A motorcycle club," Jack said. "A brotherhood," Tommy corrected, "with patches, with a purpose, with something that matters." And that's how the Iron Compass was born. Jack designed the patch himself. A compass rose with a motorcycle wheel at its center, 4 directions, all roads leading somewhere. No matter where you'd been, no matter how lost you felt, there was always a way forward. Their motto came from something Jack's father used to say, back before the war, back before everything changed. "Ride hard, live true." They had their patches made at a local embroidery shop. Mrs. Chen, who ran the place, didn't charge them full price. She'd lost her own son in Vietnam. She understood what it meant when broken soldiers tried to build something good. "You boys do good," she said. "I know you do." And they did do good, at first anyway. The Iron Compass started small. They'd ride out to nearby towns on weekends, delivering food to elderly folks who couldn't make it to grocery stores anymore. They'd fix bikes for free for any veteran who needed it. When Sarah heard about a family whose house burned down, the Compass organized a fundraiser and rebuilt their garage themselves, working through rain and heat until it was done. Word spread, not as outlaws, as helpers, as the guys who showed up when you needed them. When you saw those patches rolling into town, you didn't hide. You waved. Kids would run to the street corner just to watch them pass. The spring of 2007 brought the floods. 3 days of rain that turned the valley into a lake. Emergency services were overwhelmed. Roads were impassable. People were stranded. The Iron Compass didn't wait for permission. They didn't wait for official orders or government approval. They rode through water up to their axles, pulling people from second-story windows, delivering medical supplies to stranded families. Jack pulled an 80-year-old man from a roof while water rushed past below. Tommy carried a child through chest-deep water, his bad leg screaming with every step, but he never stopped. Red coordinated supply drops from her truck, mapping out routes and organizing volunteers. When the local news did a story, the reporter called them heroes. Jack hated that word. "We're just people who showed up," he said. "That's all. Anyone would have done the same." But they didn't. The Iron Compass did, and the town remembered. For 2 years, the Iron Compass was exactly what Jack had hoped it would be. A brotherhood, a purpose, a family built by choice instead of blood, a way to do something that mattered in a world that often felt like it didn't care whether you mattered or not. Then everything changed. The problem with building something good is that other people want to be part of it, and not everyone wants it for the right reasons. Some people see a brotherhood and want to belong. Others see an image and want to wear it. They're not the same thing. Darius Kane showed up in 2009. He rode a custom Triumph, wore expensive leather, and had the kind of confidence that made people either love him or distrust him immediately. Jack was in the second category. "I've heard about you guys," Darius said at their weekly garage meeting. "The Iron Compass. You're doing it right. Real community work, real respect. I want in." "We don't recruit," Jack said carefully. "People find us." "I found you." There was something in Darius's eyes, something hungry, something that didn't match his words, but Tommy vouched for him. Said Darius had served, had the records to prove it. Said everyone deserved a chance. Said they couldn't judge people before knowing them. Jack agreed against his instincts. It was a decision he'd regret for years. Darius brought friends. Within 6 months, the Iron Compass had doubled in size. Some of the new members were good people, some weren't, and the ones who weren't started changing what the club meant. The change was gradual, like rust creeping across metal. You don't notice it at first. Then one day you realize the damage is already done. It started with small things. The new guys wanted patches without earning them. They wanted to ride but not help. They cared about looking dangerous more than doing good. They talked about respect in ways that had nothing to do with earning it and everything to do with demanding it. "We need to establish territory," Darius said at a meeting. "Other clubs need to know this is our town." "We're not that kind of club," Jack said. "Every club is that kind of club eventually," Darius replied. "You're either wolves or sheep bear. Which one are you?" The arguments grew worse. Some members wanted to stay true to the original purpose. Others, led by Darius, wanted power, respect through fear, territory, money, all the things that had nothing to do with why they'd started this. The breaking point came on a cold November night in 2010. A rival club from the next county rolled through Millbrook. They weren't looking for trouble, just passing through on their way to somewhere else. But some of the new Compass members saw them as a challenge, saw an opportunity to prove something, to show they were tough, to make a statement. Darius led 6 guys to intercept them. Jack found out too late. By the time he arrived, bottles had been thrown, bikes had been tipped. A man was bleeding on the pavement, holding his arm at an angle that arms aren't meant to bend. Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. "What have you done?" Jack shouted at Darius. "I protected our territory, something you should have done." "This isn't our territory. This was never about territory. This was about helping people." "Wake up, Bear. This is the real world. Respect isn't given, it's taken." The police arrested 3 Compass members that night. The newspapers ran the story with a headline that made Jack's stomach turn. "Local biker gang involved in violent altercation." Gang, not club, gang. Everything unraveled after that. The town that had once waved now crossed the street when they saw the patches. Mrs. Chen wouldn't make eye contact anymore. The families they'd helped stopped calling. The reputation they'd built through years of good work was destroyed in one night of violence. The Iron Compass split. Tommy tried to hold everyone together, but it was like trying to glue shattered glass. The pieces didn't fit anymore. Some members left with Jack, wanting to return to the original purpose. Others stayed with Darius, embracing the outlaw image they'd never wanted in the first place. The final meeting was held in Miller's garage. 23 people showed up. By the end of the night, only 7 wanted to continue Jack's way. "We can rebuild," Tommy said, his voice desperate. "Start over, do it right this time. We can fix this." But Jack was done. "We already built something good, and we destroyed it. I'm not doing this again." "Bear, please." "I'm sorry, Ghost, I can't." He walked out that night, opened his own small garage on the edge of town, tried to forget everything they'd built, tried to forget the Brotherhood, tried to forget what it felt like to matter. The Iron Compass continued without him for a while, but without Jack's leadership and Tommy's heart, it fell apart. Some members drifted away. Others ended up in prison. Darius moved to another state, started another club, probably ruined that one too. By 2012, the Iron Compass was history, a cautionary tale about good intentions and bad choices. Jack tried to move on. He worked. He kept his head down. He didn't ride anymore. His bike sat in the corner of his garage, covered with a tarp, collecting dust like a tombstone, a reminder of everything he'd lost. He told himself he was fine, told himself the Brotherhood had been a mistake, told himself he was better off alone, that depending on people only led to disappointment. He was lying. The years passed. He grew older, grayer, quieter. His garage stayed busy enough. People still trusted Jack Lawson with their engines, even if they'd forgotten about Bear Lawson and the Iron Compass. Sometimes, late at night, he'd pull out his old patch, run his fingers over the compass rows, wonder what happened to the others, wonder if they'd forgotten too, wonder if any of it had mattered. Then on a Tuesday morning in early March, his phone rang. The voice on the phone was familiar but wrong, too thin, too tired, too much pain behind every word. "Bear, it's Tommy." Jack hadn't heard that nickname in years. It hit him like a fist to the chest, knocking the air from his lungs. "Tommy, Ghost, how are you?" A long pause, then quietly, "I'm dying, brother." "Lung cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave him 3 months, maybe 4 if he was lucky. He'd already started making arrangements, getting his affairs in order, as they say, like death was just paperwork." "I need to ask you something," Tommy said, "and you can say no. I'll understand if you do." "Ask." "When I go, I don't want to be buried in a cemetery. I want to be scattered, on the roads where we started, the ones where we helped people, not where it went wrong, just the good parts, just the parts that mattered." Jack closed his eyes. Memories flooded back. Good ones. the kind he tried to bury but never could. "Tommy, I know we haven't talked. I know you're done with all that, but you were my brother, you all were, and I can't think of anyone else I'd trust with this. Will you do this for me?" Jack's voice cracked. "Yeah, Ghost, yeah, I will." Jack visited Tommy in the hospital 3 days later. The man in the bed looked 20 years older than his age. Cancer does that. Steals time before it steals life. Steals everything except the soul underneath. They talked for hours about the old days, about the mistakes, about what they'd built and what they'd lost, about regrets and forgiveness. "We did good things," Tommy said. "For a while, we were exactly what we meant to be. I don't want to be remembered for what came after. I want to be remembered for that, for the good we did." "You will be," Jack promised. Tommy smiled. It was the same smile from 20 years ago when they'd first gotten his motorcycle running, when everything was still possible. Ride hard, live true. Ride hard, live true. Tommy died 6 weeks later, peaceful in his sleep, which was more than most soldiers got. Jack kept his promise. He made the calls to Red, who was running her own garage 3 states away, to Chains, who'd become a counselor at a VA center, to Wrench, who'd never stopped riding and had tears in his voice when he heard the news. He called others too, some of the original members who'd left with him when everything fell apart. "One last ride," he told them, "for Ghost, for what we used to be." Not everyone could come. Lives had moved on. Families, jobs, grudges that time hadn't healed, but 7 of them agreed to meet. 7, the same number who'd wanted to stay true at the end. They gathered at Jack's garage on a Saturday morning in April. They were older, grayer, heavier in some cases. Lines on their faces told stories of hard years and harder lessons. But when they saw each other, something clicked back into place. Something that had been missing for a decade. Red hugged Jack so hard he couldn't breathe. Chains shook his hand and didn't let go for a long moment. Wrench looked at Jack's covered motorcycle and said, "Tell me that thing still runs." "Let's find out," Jack said. They spent the morning getting ready, checking bikes, making repairs, replacing old parts. It felt like the old days, talking while they worked, remembering the good times, laughing at old jokes. "Why'd we let it fall apart?" Red asked quietly. Jack didn't have a simple answer. "We forgot what mattered. We let other things become more important than the Brotherhood. We let the wrong voices get too loud." "Are we still brothers?" Wrench asked. "After all this time, after everything?" Chains answered before Jack could. "Blood doesn't make family, choices do. We're choosing this. Right now, that makes us brothers." They left at noon. 7 motorcycles. 7 riders wearing old patches they'd pulled from storage, the leather worn but still strong. 7 people carrying a portion of Tommy's ashes in small jars attached to their bikes. The plan was simple. Ride to every place where the iron compass had helped someone during those first good years. Leave some of Tommy's ashes at each spot. Remember who they'd been. Say goodbye properly. The first stop was Mrs. Chen's embroidery shop. She was still there, older now, moving slower, but she recognized them immediately. "The compass," she said softly, tears already forming. "I wondered if I'd ever see those patches again." "We're sorry," Jack said, "for how things ended, for letting you down, for not being what we promised to be." She waved a hand, dismissing his apology. "You boys did more good than bad. I never forgot that. This town never forgot that." They left a handful of Tommy's ashes in the flower bed outside her shop. Red said a few words. "You helped us become something. You believed in us. Thank you." Mrs. Chen cried. So did they. The second stop was the house they'd rebuilt after the fire. A different family lived there now, but the garage was still standing. The concrete foundation they'd poured together was still solid. Jack knelt and scattered ashes into the dirt. "You carried a 2x4 with a broken leg," he said to the wind, to Tommy's memory. "You never complained once. Not once. The third stop was the valley where they'd rescued people during the floods. The water was gone now, just a quiet stream running through, but Jack remembered. He remembered the sound of the rain, the roar of the water, the weight of that child in Tommy's arms. Chain scattered ashes into the stream, watched them drift away on the current. He saved lives here. That matters, that will always matter. They rode for hours. To the VFW hall where they'd organized fundraisers, to the park where they'd given free bike rides to kids, to the old warehouse where they'd distributed food every winter to families who had nothing. At each stop, someone they'd helped found them. Word had spread somehow. Small towns are like that. News travels fast. An old woman who remembered when they'd fixed her roof after a storm. You boys were angels. A veteran who said their garage had been the first place he'd felt understood after coming home from Iraq. You saved me. I was going to eat my gun, had it loaded. Then I met you guys, and I didn't. You gave me a reason not to. A man in his 30s who'd been a child during the floods. Tommy carried me out of my house. I was 8 years old. The water was rising. I was scared. I never forgot his face, or yours. With each stop, something shifted. The guilt they'd carried for how the iron compass had ended began to ease. The shame of watching something good turn bad started to feel less heavy. The weight they'd carried for a decade began to lift. They realized something. Their best legacy wasn't the noise they'd made. It wasn't the territory they'd tried to claim or the reputation they'd accidentally earned. It was the lives they'd quietly touched. The people they'd helped without asking for anything in return. The moments of kindness that rippled forward through time, touching people they'd never meet. By the time they reached the final stop, the sun was setting. They'd ridden almost 200 miles, visited 11 places, met dozens of people who remembered, who still remembered. The last location was a cliffside overlook on the edge of town. The place where they'd first ridden together as the Iron Compass, where Tommy had proposed making it official, where it had all begun. Jack parked his bike. The others followed. They stood in a line, looking out over the valley as the sky turned orange and purple and gold. Jack opened the last jar of ashes. The wind was strong up here, perfect for this final goodbye. I don't know what to say, Jack admitted. I'm not good with words, never have been. Say what you feel, Red said gently. Jack nodded. He thought about 20 years, about brotherhood and mistakes, about building something good and watching it crumble, about this day, riding with people he'd missed more than he'd admitted to himself. Ghost, he said to the wind, to the sunset, to his brother. Tommy, brother, you kept us together even when we were apart. You remembered the good when we could only see the bad. You called us back when we'd forgotten who we were. You reminded us what mattered. He paused, his voice cracked. We rode for you today, we remembered, and we're not going to forget again. That's a promise. He opened the jar. The wind caught the ashes immediately, pulling them out over the valley. The orange light made them glow for a moment, like stars, before they disappeared into the air, becoming part of everything. The others revved their engines. Once, twice, 3 times, a final salute, a warrior's goodbye. Then silence, beautiful, complete silence. Chain spoke first. What now? Jack looked at the group. His people, his brothers and sister, his family. Now we ride home. And maybe we keep riding together, the right way this time, the way we should have from the start. Red smiled through her tears. The Iron Compass. If you want, or something new, doesn't matter what we're called, matters what we do, matters that we show up, that we help, that we remember what this is really about. Wrench laughed, wiping his eyes. Ride hard, live true. They said it together like a prayer, like a promise. Ride hard, live true. They rode back as the stars came out. 7 motorcycles in formation. 7 people who'd found each other again. 7 members of a brotherhood that maybe, just maybe, wasn't as broken as they'd thought. Tommy's ashes were scattered across the valley now, part of the land he'd loved, part of the roads he'd ridden, part of the good he'd done, part of everything. And somewhere in the wind, if you listened carefully, you could almost hear him say, "Welcome back, brothers. I knew you'd remember. I always knew." Sometimes the loudest hearts ride in silence.